It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do change. Change.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Spirit Cafe. I'm your co-host, Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. We work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We include the Métis, Inuit, and all other Indigenous people. Although I am not a person of African descent, I am committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with the BIPOC community and also with LGBTQ plus and two-spirited peoples as well as an ally. It is important that we work together, that we make a commitment to reconciliation, to shifting consciousness, and to acknowledging our history and our path forward. What I know now is that we are one, and that in that oneness, we are all responsible for all things. So I'm grateful for this acknowledgement, and I take a moment to simply pause. It is in accepting our oneness that I feel truly, truly blessed. And now my remarkable co-host, Cheryl Rogers.
Hi, Barbara. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce our guest today, Reverend Kelly Isola. And Kelly and I have known each other now for a number of years, and we were just talking about how we started this kind of conversation before COVID, and people weren't ready for it. And people have not been ready for Kelly often because she's passionate and she's been having courageous conversations for a long time. She's not afraid to broach any topic. So let me just tell you a little bit more about her. She's passionate about supporting people and organizations go live and love more authentically, to move toward a better version of themselves so they can make their mark on the world. She's masterful at relating concepts across her various life experiences, which allow her to connect with and support audiences from all walks of life. Let me slow down. She truly is one of a kind, force of nature, a genius, with words, a brilliant thinker, professional excavator of individual collective souls, and she also masquerades as a consultant teacher, author, and transformative mentor. And know that these are her words. Kelly today is going to be talking with us about the myth of wellness, the industry that grew out of self-help and fitness classes, which has exploded into everything from yoga to crystals to juice cleansers, promises to make us better, stronger, healthier, and whole. And the reality is that while certain populations are making choices about organic and GMO-free food, the rest of the country is trying to figure out how to feed their families and pay their bills. The truth is that we, the big we, are not well, not by a long shot. So thank you, Kelly. Welcome. And we're so happy to have you be with us here today.
Thank you.
Welcome,
I'm
Kelly.
excited.
Me too. You know, the one thing I neglected to mention, which I will mention because, you know, sometimes our buttons get pushed by some of the things that we say, and that's okay. And that's one of the things that I learned from Kelly. She would challenge me in my thoughts, my words, and she would say, "Oh, really? So think about that. Think about what you just said."
That doesn't sound anything like me, Cheryl.
Well, that's why I love you, right? So,
I think we
yeah.
need more people on the planet who speak out in the way you do. And I learned from you this and, you
Yeah,
know,
both and.
instead of going, sort of separating, it's like bringing it all together, the shit and the glory, it all comes.
So on
all
that
important.
note, can I
Mhm.
add one thing to your land acknowledgement?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I couldn't find my land acknowledgement, so I was doing it off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, and that was fine. And so here's my first, I don't think this will push buttons, but here's my
Go
first
ahead. Yeah.
is we often with the land acknowledgement do, as you did,
Yeah.
and in recognizing that it's a living entity, that we work at not talking about necessarily as though the past tense or just ancestors, but
Yeah.
that we have a responsibility to those that are coming after us. And
Absolutely.
so acknowledging the land, certainly of, like where I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, United States area, I sit on the unceded territory of the Kaskaskia, of the Osage, the Choctaw, many indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
And I also need to acknowledge the future generations. And what I mean by that is, in order to have this meeting today, in order to come together today, there are individuals that are mining the earth for the minerals, the metals,
Yeah.
the things necessary to make screens and computers and keyboards. We're drilling oil to be
Yeah.
able to make the plastic things sitting in front of us. And
Yeah.
so I'm not saying, don't have meetings like this. And I want to acknowledge what's happening to the land in order to make these meetings possible.
Awesome.
We are implicated in this systemic harm that we keep perpetuating. So
Mhm.
just bringing a eyes and a
Mhm.
voice and a consciousness to it
Mhm.
is just helping us in healing relations, thinking about how we're still, you know, still acknowledging the land for harm, and yet we're still harming it. And so how are
Oh,
we, how do we process those emotions and how do we exchange? Because there is an exchange. I'm just causing trouble. I don't have the answer to how do I do this kind of meeting with the minerals and the metals and the, mining for oil to make plastic. Like I don't have the solution to that. And I think the first step is to say it.
Yeah, to be aware
absolutely.
and to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I love that, Kelly, because I think consciousness is the creator of everything. And so as we shift our consciousness and become more responsible for all aspects of everything we do, there is a shift that occurs. So I really appreciate that,
Mhm.
uh, adding that element, because the fact that we're here means we're mining the land in a way that is harming it
Yes.
ultimately.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so here I'm gonna might as well go for the gusto at the very
go
beginning.
for it. That's what
So
this show's
what you
about.
just said about, changing consciousness and then we do something different, not always,
No, we don't.
right? The missing piece to that is yes, I can shift consciousness or being aware of what I'm aware of, but it takes our will to make it happen. And there's
To
far
get
too many
together.
people that just don't have the will.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Martin Luther King Jr. talked about it. Like we have the skill, we have the abilities, we have the competency, we just don't have the will.
Mm.
Yeah, and I really love that. When I, work with a lot of organizations that talk about inclusivity, and I sit back and go, "That's great," but when it comes right down to it, when, your particular thing is interrupted or inconvenienced by someone, are you still willing to be inclusive? Are you willing to set aside your comfort in order to be inclusive of this other person that maybe you don't understand, or you just haven't connected with in some way, or you don't particularly like them or whatever? Can you still be inclusive? And I think that's also part of that bigger question. How do we have the will to make everything a little bit better?
Well, we have the skill and capacity, and there is the will is present. It's just whether we choose to engage it and put it into action. And to do that requires me and others to what am I willing to stop doing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right? What am I
Mhm.
willing to do that makes me uncomfortable?
Mhm.
You don't get out of you don't If we really want to talk about shifting consciousness, if we really want to talk about having a courageous conversation, if we really want to talk about changing our world, justice, liberation, love, like all these lovely words, then what are you willing to do that makes you uncomfortable? That's the only way.
It's the only way.
Love is
Mhm.
love is we throw that around in spiritual communities, the word love, as though it's a cognitive thing. It's not. It's a messy thing.
Mhm.
It's really
It
messy.
really is. Because if
Mhm.
I am to love, it means I'm willing to stand on principle. And if you're going to disagree with me, you get to. And it doesn't mean I move. Like truly,
Mhm. Mhm.
love is messy. It's not this
Mhm.
unicorns out of my butt and pink frosting and sorry to your listeners, but it's not this fluffy, easy. It's not at all.
Mhm.
No, not at all.
It's
And don't
revolution.
apologize. That's what we're here for.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um,
There's
yeah,
more where that came from.
well, and so this is exactly what I mean, Barbara. You see what I experience with her.
I love it. I love it. I want you on
Um,
my joy show as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying, and it's not easy, like you say. You don't have the answers. I
No.
mean, we're talking about not just this show. We're talking about how we work. We're
Yes.
talking about a really much bigger issue, but it's got to start somewhere, right? And that is by at least raising some awareness so that we can also educate ourselves better. Because I think that's a big part of it is, it's no excuse not knowing
Right.
when we know different, right?
Well, when you're the dominant group, you're the dominant culture, it's actually kind of easy to stay ignorant. You can
Absolutely.
choose. It's and unconsciously, because I'm not. If I'm the dominant group, then I'm really not all that impacted by a lot of things, uh,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and
And
so it is easy to stay in
Yeah.
uh, not knowing.
In vagueness.
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
and
And what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I know you're saying, and that's why I said vagueness. But yeah, absolutely. And so there needs to be the will to
Yeah.
even look at it, right?
Yes.
The will to even step out of our comfort zone to even try and understand and learn more. Tell me more.
Yep. To my silence is complicit.
Yeah.
absolutely. And learning is not about anybody who is marginalized telling me how I should be doing it. It's about me going out and figuring it out and reading and studying and researching and discovering other cultures and learning and being willing to make mistakes
Mhm.
and to acknowledge them and not defend
Oh,
when I
yeah.
step in it, right?
Oh, it's the biggest I can't tell you how many times I'm in groups of people and and it's usually here in the US, it's usually some well-intentioned white person. And all I
Oh,
want to do is look at them and go, shh, stop talking, like, stop, 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 because they're just digging a hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
And defense is offense. And I don't think people really realize that. The minute you take that defensive stand, you're blocking conversation completely. And
Yeah.
it's important to go, wow, yes, thank you. Just
Mhm.
acknowledge you made a mistake. It's okay.
Mhm.
We all do, but don't go into defense.
Well, and it's very, especially in spiritual communities,
Mhm.
there's this toxic there's this toxicity around positive thinking. There's a
Mhm.
toxicity around valuing intention over impact. So we say something that is just out of I don't know, or I'm just moving my mouth and not
Mhm.
thinking, and then someone responds with something that we find ourselves feeling defensive about, and we immediately go into, well, that's not what I meant, or what I intended to say, or well, that explains what my intention is. Well, the truth is the intention means absolutely nothing.
You've done harm.
Doesn't mean a bleeping thing. There,
Yeah.
Yeah.
see, I'll edit a little bit. It doesn't. The intention really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that comes back to the will, right? It's the impact. What's the impact of what I'm saying? What's the impact of what I'm doing? And that's why we need to learn
Mhm.
that humility thing of like, stop talking, stop talking. Um,
Mhm.
Well, I was the minister in a Black church for 11 years, and, as a white person raised in a white family in a white community, I did step in it a few
I
times.
bet you did.
Oh, man, did I ever, and one of the ones that was immediately brought to my attention, but of course, I knew it as soon as it came out of my mouth, I just couldn't figure out how to hit the rewind and get it back in, was when I talked about being the black sheep of the family.
Oh,
I know. As soon as the words came out, I went, "Oh man, wrong
yeah.
audience." But perfect opportunity, because a woman came up to me immediately when I stepped off the podium and said, "Reverend, do you really think that was appropriate?" And I said, "Absolutely not."
Mhm.
Yeah.
And she immediately relaxed
Hmm.
and then told me about her journey and the work she does in the community and just all the stuff that she's been acknowledged for and her gifts. And it was such a wonderful opportunity for her and I to become very, very close. And she became one of my greatest cheerleaders. But it was, me acknowledging, like, you're absolutely right. I
Yeah.
blew that one big time.
Mhm.
And, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And,
Mhm.
but defending it is a huge, huge mistake.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and so I want to. So Wayne in the chat made the comment about I can impact the world, and yes, of course. And I would go further and say you already are.
You
Mhm.
already are. Yeah.
What we need to be aware of is how I'm impacting the world,
Mhm.
and how I'm impacting the world in ways that don't serve the world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is so in terms of, I think we actually have a topic today. So if I'm going to segue into that, this myth of wellness, this is part of it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? I do impact the world, and
Mhm.
what we very often do in spiritual communities, the ones that I've been around for a few decades, is really get caught in that positivity trap.
Mhm.
That I can impact the world, and I already do. And
Mhm.
what I think serves us better is to know the ways. Of course, I want to know the ways that I positively impact, or my impact lifts people up, right? Or my impact, promotes healing, or
Mhm.
community well-being. I want to know those things. What does more for us is to know how I impact the world in the ways where I prop up systems of oppression. And
Oh,
for
Yeah.
exactly.
spiritual communities, and I speak about spiritual communities because that's where I spend some of my time, and it applies to everyone.
Mhm.
When I can see how I prop up systems of oppression, now I can go into, the will, that I have the will. I am the will to do it differently.
Yeah.
And it's not about shaming or guilting, or, and it's not about when or if, it's how.
Mhm.
We do it every single day. We perpetuate systems of oppression. We just
Mhm.
do.
Yeah,
It's
we do.
not meant to beat anybody over the head or, like I said,
Yeah.
guilt or shame, but the healing comes when I know how,
Yeah.
and I can learn to not.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I say, and in terms to what what you're sharing, Rev Kelly, is we impacting the world, like you said, either way, whether
Yeah,
we're aware of it or not. So
yeah,
we can impact the world unconsciously,
right.
or we can consciously impact the world when when we start having that awareness and being more mindful and being wanting to find out more and learn more, and yeah, and shifting how we speak and
Yes.
the things we say and do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So the myth of wellness, I got this little blurb and I'm like, yes, let's talk about this because it is a myth. I mean, when you look at the industry of medicine, of the drug companies, of all that, the focus, although there is the alternative healthcare that a lot of us look to, that's where the money's going. That's where the consciousness, the intention is towards creating drugs for money, for a economic impact, which has more side effects. And then we have to address the side effects. So we've got to take something else for that. And I'm not sure that that's where you were going, Kelly.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm looking at your face and thinking maybe not. But that's a big one for me. Is really being able to recognize that society doesn't really focus on wellness; we focus on sickness.
Yeah, and
But
I
I
think
also,
too that it's about dieting and exercise and the right cosmetics and getting a facelift and doing some Botox, all of these things that somehow the way we're built, the way we're made is wrong and bad. There's no wellness in that.
yeah,
There's no
exactly,
wellness in that. So
exactly.
yeah, I think we got a whole gamut of things. Kelly, go.
So what when I talk about the myth of wellness, and the little excuse me, the little piece of information that I sent you is that um, there's a when in talking about wellness, there's a culture of wellness that here, at least I could say in the U.S. and probably you know filters over into Canada and vice versa. Um, but this culture of wellness that we have here in the U.S. Um, really is making things worse for everyone. And what I mean by that is when I say a culture of wellness, I'm not talking about. I mean, healthcare certainly plays in, but I'm really talking about um, the inequities within the wellness world. Right? There's a
Right.
well-being gap.
The industry that grew out of self-help and fitness classes that
Yes,
has exploded into everything from yoga to crystals to juice cleansers,
yes,
etc. Promises to make us stronger, better, healthier, thinner, whole.
yes. So it's and what that is, and we, in spiritual communities, we talk about self-care and empowerment and a lot of things that really are the energy of gotta go, gotta do, like there's a destination to get to, right? Within the well-being or wellness community. And so that's really what I'm talking about. Um, but a lot of our wellness industry draws on these very ancient lineages of mind body practices from indigenous cultures or South Asia. Um, and yet we don't necessarily, and we don't generally employ a collectivist approach to it. Like we here, in New Thought, there's very much, rugged individualism. I do my own navel gazing on my own. It's my prayer, it's my meditation, it's my practice. We may have a yoga class together, but I'm there, me. right? And there is and even within yoga, right? Yoga comes from very ancient traditions, and the heart of those um, has been divorced from how we see it today,
Mhm.
how it's practiced today, and part of that, believe it or not, is you need the yoga mat and particular yoga clothing, and the what I'm eating or what I'm drinking, and I can guarantee you there's a number of people that are listening now or will listen later and go, well, that's not me. And my challenge would be is, are you sure?
Mhm.
you know to um to just keep to really, because it's colonizer thinking,
Mhm.
Yes.
right? It's very capitalist.
Mhm.
And capitalism is here in the US is built on the backs of enslaved people. So what
Yes.
the capitalism we have here in the US comes from the slave trade. Period. It's not
Mhm.
it's not a maybe kind of theory thing. We know it. We could trace it. And so our wellness industry, um, that as you were reading what I wrote, Cheryl, about the shakes and the self help stuff, that it's $4.5 billion industry. so,
Mhm.
so it's of self help that just $4.5 billion, and I think, wow, so we're really crying out for help.
Mhm.
So we're willing to pay for retreats. We're willing to pay for books. We're willing to pay for classes. All things in an effort, largely unconsciously, to get to a destination of now I feel well,
Mm.
which is a complete myth. It's a toxic,
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to um, actually taking yourself out of that system. Take yourself out of what's called grind culture. Um, Taking yourself out of that, and one, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can remove yourself, and
Mhm.
um resting, and
Right.
collectively, right? Collectively resting, and allowing yes, I mean, there's a whole conversation just around rest,
Mhm.
but not that, and the word of perfect, right? And the word of, and we do yoga and we do Pilates and we do exercise classes because what drives us is my body needs to look a certain way.
Mhm.
Now and I know people are like, well, no, that's not me. Yeah, it is.
It is.
Um,
Yeah.
and of course, it's not every single person, but I've been doing this long enough that I'm like, yeah, it's most people, that
Yeah.
there's a particular shape the body needs to be.
Well, we're so conditioned, right? We're so conditioned that we don't realize that these are the reasons that we are doing things.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Mhm.
was listening to a speaker the other day who was talking about one of the reasons why the world is kind of as it is, looking like it's a problem, is because of the self hatred we have on ourselves. We hate our bodies. We hate our mannerisms. There's so much about ourselves that we really don't appreciate, love, or accept, and so we go into this wellness pit. And while we're there, all we're doing is trying to change everything so that we can be acceptable in the world, rather than allowing ourselves to come to a place of self love and acceptance that allows us then to actually reshape the world. Because if we have love, we can share that. We can live in the world in a way that supports well-being for all people,
Mhm.
not just for the ones that I like or the ones that look like me or are in the same spirituality as me, but to actually be in a place where I can be loving and accepting of all people. I've got to have it in order to give it, and most of us don't have it.
Well, and I'd even challenge that.
Mhm.
Shocker, I know. Um, uh,
We got to have you back, Kelly.
I know. So that I would even go so far as, at least at the moment, because I'm kind of a practical, down to earth kind of gal, to just take love out of the equation.
Yes,
Let's
yes.
just get with reality and recognize that well-being and wellness are two different things.
Different things, yes.
Yeah. So well-being is the state of being well, or feeling whole, whereas
Yeah.
wellness is the active pursuit of well-being.
Yes.
And so we have here in the United States a well-being gap,
Of course.
because there are unequal conditions to determine who gets to be well and who doesn't.
Mm,
And it's that disparity is not driven by personal choice, it's driven by proximity to power and privilege.
it is
Mhm.
power and privilege. And on
Mhm.
that note, we're going to take a short commercial break and hold that thought, everybody, and don't go away. You're watching Spirit Cafe on the New Thought Media Network, and we will be right back with more of Reverend Kelly Isola.
Camp Cedar Ridge. It's amazing.
The setting is absolutely breathtaking. The staff are so delightful and so nice and pleasant, and the food is amazing.
Well, welcome back. Whew, we are on a roll here today. Reverend Kelly, you are just taking it up a notch. I love it. I love it. All right, where were we?
We're going into power and privilege.
Power
And
and privilege.
as
Yeah.
we do that, Rev Kelly, what I just want to share when I'm here, this billion-trillion-dollar industry, we have the drug companies. Now we've got this side of it as well. I think the point for me is that it's still feeding the monster.
Yes.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
both sides are feeding the monster, and that's where we become cogs in a wheel. We don't even think for ourselves anymore, and so I think that's where we talk about power and privilege and who's benefiting from it all.
Yes. So one of the reasons I have a little bit, so part of the work I do is I have an initiative my co-founder, Reverend Ogun Holder, and it's called Project Sanctus. And so the work that we do is embodied anti-racism. And we have a podcast with Love and Justice for All. You can find it on any podcast media outlet. And so this conversation that we're having is, we've covered that several times in the podcast, and it's always the power and the privilege, you know. And so for me, the embodied anti-racism is coming back to the word embodied and really about the body. Um, okay, so your person behind the scenes is fabulous. She's just, gotta say, all over it. I love that. You know what? You know why I love it? Because I have this sense of being cared for. I have this sense of being taken care of and cared for. And why I'm pointing to that is because that's what um, wellness, the wellness industry, and our well-being has to have a focus on collective care. Otherwise, never mind. There's otherwise really never mind. There isn't this my well-being is, or our well-being, everyone's well-being is a human right, not a privilege. So I'm not, my well-being is not isolated from yours. So true wellness, right? The true wellness, meaning that active pursuit of well-being, demands that we confront everything that's in the way of the collective well-being, the collective wholeness, the collective caring. It has to be. Otherwise, it's just, it's like, don't, I almost want to say don't bother, and I don't want to be that extreme necessarily. And we've very much fixated on, the wellness industry fixating on isolation and escapism. Think about retreats, right? That how many times do we have? I mean, retreats, webinars. I mean, how many email? I get at least minimum of a dozen emails a day that are inviting me to some fabulous retreat or online wellness thing for 5 steps for healing your trauma, and do this for your well-being and care, and get out of your mind, like all of these things, and they're all to hook me into, I need to do something or go somewhere to be well, to escape this in order to be, for my well-being.
Right.
Now, let me be clear about
cost of a bundle as well.
Yes, but I want to be clear about one thing, is that I'm not saying don't go on a retreat. I'm not saying don't do that webinar. And I'm saying maybe it's time, the best thing I can do for myself, for my well-being, is to remove myself from that. And I think that's part of our challenge, is that, there's this fixation on self-help, self-seeking, whatever, pick something, self-awareness, self-care, all these self words that are challenging, because it's not an either or.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's also that if we keep looking outside of ourselves, and not, working internally, because it's got to start somewhere, and it's got to start with our internal work, with our shifting in our perspectives, thinking about differently, and I think that, yes, we have to do it collectively, and it has to start with each individual, so that the collective grows into a collective, if that makes sense. So that we grow into a collective. We grow into a collective. So when it's individual, I don't mean like I need to work on me, myself, I do, but with the consciousness of why I'm doing it, and what I'm doing, and what I'm doing it for.
And I would say you do both at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know we have this belief, I have to do me first before the we, or, it's like put on your own oxygen mask before you help someone else. I understand that. I don't wholeheartedly agree or disagree. I think it's both.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what I'm saying is looking for help, self-help.
Yes.
Doing all that kind of thing outside of ourselves. That's where I'm going with needing to, you say, pause, take a breath, look at what's going on inside of you, look at where you can make a difference, where you can do something about it, instead of just just working on, my healing, and externally.
Right. And I'm going to go a step further in, yes, remove myself, and there's a rest, and start centering pleasure, joy,
Mm.
doing things just for the sake of doing them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we still have, even, and just, if you go back and listen to, so now I'm going to pick on you, Cheryl. If you go back and listen to what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
you can hear, yes, I come apart and I rest to find what I need to do, to fix, to be in alignment with, to be aware. It's just very subtly cloaked in the
Okay.
do, get her done, get her done, get her
Yeah.
done, instead
Yeah.
of remove myself from grind culture, rest, and then go play in the rain.
Yeah, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
Go have sex,
Yeah.
right? Or go to my
Yeah.
favorite coffee shop, or
That's
just
true.
walk around the park. Like, do
Yeah.
something that is really just pleasurable, that is meaningful, that has joy, that's, I would say, silly, that's fun, because that is well-being.
Yeah, it's
Wow. And
reciprocal.
isn't it interesting that some of us, including myself, need a reminder to do that?
Right.
I mean, like, wow, right? What
And
is that? What
well,
is that?
yeah, because we've relegated the idea of pleasure. Even when you say the word, there's at least half of the people listening that automatically their mind, if you say pleasure, their mind goes to sex or
Mhm.
sexual activity or something, something in that. But pleasure that's like one of a gajillion things that are pleasurable.
Mhm.
Right? If you like to cook, then go cook a meal. Right? If
Mhm.
you like to sit outside, then go sit outside. If you like to go feed the ducks, go feed the ducks.
Yeah.
If you like to take a nap, go take a nap.
Mhm.
If you like sex, go have sex.
Mhm.
But it's the idea of putting pleasure first,
Mhm.
not as a if I have time when I get around to it.
Right.
That
Right.
as a oh, well, I don't have time in my day. Well, that's where the healing is.
Right.
It's taking that time to breathe.
Yeah, and just and it's that's decolonizing the mind, is to remove myself from the grind culture, to
Yeah.
remove myself from the ideas that, because what we're taught and how we're socialized is that we're not good enough.
Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, think about it, in terms of new thought.
Mhm.
And here's some privilege built into new thought. There's a lot of privilege in new thought, but in terms of our well-being, is we come into a new thought community, and a lot of us went, "Phew, oh my gosh, this is, I'm home," or some idea like that, like, oh, this is what I've been thinking but I didn't have the words for, and there's this sense of relief, right, and coming home and belonging, and which is all true.
Mm.
Then if you stick around long enough, along comes a class that you need to take to transform yourself,
Yes.
right?
Back to doing.
Yes. And
Mhm.
I'm not suggesting that I don't need to, there aren't things about me that need some work and healing. It's just how we don't, it's how subtle it is, right?
Mhm.
That we
Mhm.
don't necessarily notice that, I
Mhm.
walk in, I'm home, you're quote unquote perfect just the way you are,
Mhm.
around long enough. Okay, now it's time to change. And I'm like, well, what happened to the, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and that's just
It's
one.
yeah. So subtle. I mean, we don't think about it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we've been
And when you
conditioned.
point it out, it makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
I'm loved, I'm whole, I'm complete, and I'm accepted the way I am.
Right.
Well,
When,
and if you watch your children or grandchildren, how free they are till the day they enter school.
yeah. Yeah.
School builds soldiers. That's what it's designed for, is to create this colonial structure of
Yes, it's one of the worst industries here in the U.S. All we do is we, produce and output more white
absolutely.
privilege here in
Mhm.
the U.S. in our
Absolutely.
educational system.
Mhm.
But so this myth of wellness, in terms of in new thought communities or just generally, what makes it a myth is that there's all of this, all these things we do because we've been socialized that we're not good enough the way we are. If you buy this thing, then you'll be happy. If you do this thing, you'll feel beautiful. If you lose a certain amount of weight, then you'll be acceptable. If you eat these particular foods, then you'll be healthy. And if you read these 8,000 books sitting on your shelf on how to, that are self-seeking, self-aware, self-care,
How
self-help,
did you know?
I don't know. It was just a wild guess, Cheryl. But if I read them, I'll be enlightened. And so it becomes this storyline. It's a system that profits from our sickness.
Yes. So it keeps us sick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we buy it. We buy it hook, line, and
we
sinker.
do because there are woundedness and there are some pains and traumas that we carry, and it's just there's a needing to get out of that that thinking and the culture in order to really do my work and to
Mhm.
center pleasure. And it's, I mean, I say it very easily, and it's not necessarily easy to do because
Mhm.
you're probably the only one in your community doing it, which is why I'm a prophet not welcome in the village.
Well, you're welcome in my village any day, anytime, any moment of the week. I love everything you're saying. And,
Mhm.
that Monday night, I do my services Monday night just because I like to be different. Um,
Excellent.
and what we did on Monday was, and I use the word love as self-acceptance, acceptance of all the good, the bad, the guilt, the regrets, the all of it. And so the talk was about how do I pull together all of me so that I can show up in the world authentically. And it's an interesting conversation for people because we're so busy trying to fit in that we have forgotten or we've lost who we are and we don't even desire to find ourselves. We're just still wanting to fit in, right? Like I've got
Right.
to,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
frightening.
it is frightening.
Mhm.
And it's frightening in the sense that everything, so we have this giant hole of like, well, who am I, and what am I doing here, and what's meaningful for me, and what should I be doing, like all those questions are part of grind culture.
Yeah.
And if I can step out of it,
Yeah.
um, and just start with a nap, like
Mhm.
really, just start with a nap.
Mhm.
But we have this culture here in the US that's based on separation, supremacy,
Mhm.
scarcity.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we do everything we can to be well, and yet everything we try to do to be well is in service to separation, scarcity, and supremacy.
And it's keeping us really, really sick. Really,
Mhm.
really
Yeah, it
sick.
does.
Mhm.
And there are so those things that that I mentioned, like the yoga and crystals or the juice fast, like it's not that those in and of themselves um is necessarily, it's not about not doing those things.
Mhm.
It's about understanding why and how, uh,
Mhm.
and that there can be no well-being of me without a well-being of we.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
I love
have
that.
to, yeah. So looking inside and looking at the um, uh, how we're playing these assigned roles, in systems of oppression, how we're using our yoga or our running practice or whatever we're doing is like how we're using it. And again, I'm not saying it's not about exercise. It's not about all the things that have been mentioned about ways we can care for ourselves.
Mhm.
But it's looking at what's driving it, and that
Mhm.
requires a deeper. Um, you got to take yourself out of the
Yeah.
box and really be willing to just take a deeper look. And it doesn't happen overnight. And culture is like water; it's slippery and it's fluid and it shapeshifts, and we
Mhm.
are molded and manipulated by it.
Mhm.
So it's so we've learned to
Mhm.
swim in a water that we don't even know we're in.
Mhm.
So it's recognizing the legacy of our colonization and how that legacy shows up in every aspect of our human journey.
Mhm.
I think that's
Wellness.
yeah, and that's the biggest challenge for those of us who are white, because it's like asking a fish to describe water.
Right.
It's, it's what I know, it's what I've been in, and so it
Yeah,
requires
and the fish says, "What water?"
what water?
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm finding when I talk to some people occasionally about these issues is I will get, well, but I'm not part of the problem.
Yeah.
Well, if you're accepting this colonial society in which we've been bred into, trained into, then yes, you are. You're part of the whole system, which means you are in fact part of the problem. And how we shift that is number one, to know, to all of a sudden recognize I am in water,
Right.
and what am I going to do about that? And I think that's been sort of the biggest challenge. I know as I've been reading more and stuff, I'm like, my eyes are opening, going, "Oh my God, I have no idea."
Mhm.
So this journey is really personal, but again, I love that statement. There can be no well-being of me without the well-being of we,
Mhm.
and just trying to make everything about we. And I'm part of an organization called Toronto People with AIDS Foundation, and we're working to create a very decolonized, indigenized system of governance and running of the entire organization. And one of the challenges we're faced with is the rules of Revenue Canada
Mhm.
about how a nonprofit has to operate.
Right.
And the challenge of that is you have a board of trustees that, or a board of directors that may or may not understand the depth of the work that we need to do in order to decolonize this, and the importance of it ultimately, because we have such a racialized group of people that we're dealing with. And so I'm not sure how we're going to do this whole decolonizing thing, but we're in it. We're in it, and we're questioning, and we're
It takes a
doing
long time.
whatever. Yeah,
You
and
can't. Yeah, you can't build a structure from the way I say it, and it's a rephrase from Audre Lorde, but you can't, and we talk about building bridges, and I'm like,
yeah,
you can't build bridges with colonial trees.
right.
Mm.
And so, you cannot, as Audre Lorde says it, you can't build the master's house
Mhm.
with the master's tools.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
it's
That's
sort of
just,
stepping out of the box and coming up with a whole new strategy,
yeah.
and, we don't really know what that is.
No,
So
that's the thing.
yeah,
We want to, but you can't because it's
Mhm.
outside the, our current state of consciousness, and it's outside the
absolutely.
paradigm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
feel yeah,
so
so
it's
we
it's the term, the Audre Lorde quote is, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house."
ooh, yes.
Yeah. So
Wow,
yeah.
wow.
Oh, look at
Mm. Yeah. So what is ours to do? I mean, we can call ourselves allies and all that kind of thing, but what is ours to do?
well, for me, I mean, there's always multiple things you can quote unquote do. For me, it's the place, because it takes years to decolonize. It takes years to really uh, to see your own, how you are contributing to the
Mhm.
systems, how you prop up. And again, it's not if or when, it's how. So you
Mhm.
do it every day.
Mhm.
It's about learning how. And the one of the best ways to do that, and again, and now I'm back to focusing on self, right? Because it's not a either or,
Mhm.
is to get your butt into an affinity group.
Mhm.
So an affinity group is the best way to learn, for white folks, your patterns of whiteness,
Mhm.
right? Is
Mhm.
because we're engaged in them every day, um,
Right. Mhm.
all the time. So
Mhm.
it's that, because that's where you will learn the most. That's where you will learn like how you're complicit. And we have to learn to kind of get over ourselves,
Mhm.
in terms of, it's not about feeling guilty. It's not about, any kind of shame. It's not about anything other than, you know, than me knowing how I can be different. It's like the story you told, Barbara. You're like, oh, you say something, the words are still hanging in a word bubble. Don't even bother trying to get it back into your mouth. Just
Nope.
keep moving.
Keep
Um,
moving.
and
Yeah.
Mhm.
so it's recognizing that you can't do this alone. Like,
Mhm.
stop trying to do it alone.
Mhm.
And in terms of in spiritual communities, having the conversations from the front of the room.
Mhm.
Tell you how many spiritual communities I go into where the spiritual leader is, well, it makes people uncomfortable. Yes, that's the point.
Yeah.
Supposed to.
Yeah.
Nothing grows in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And yet spiritual leaders in most denominations are too they're afraid, which is what keeps us stuck, which is
Mhm.
Yes, it is.
part of that myth of wellness. Like, just
Mhm.
do comfortable, we're
Mhm.
going to do this class, and so that we feel better.
Mhm.
Don't really, maybe for the half hour, an hour, but
But it doesn't
everybody's
last.
there to feel better for themselves.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think for me, one of the things I've often said is, if I'm not making you uncomfortable, I'm not doing my job.
Exactly. I'm with
Mhm.
you 100%. And
Yeah.
for some reason, Barbara, people don't really enjoy that.
No, they don't.
I'm not sure what that's all about, but
Maybe that's why my congregation is a little bitty one.
hey, you know what? I'd rather have so this happens for Reverend Ogan and I with our Project Sanctus, is it's
Yeah.
not about the numbers.
No, it's not.
You can't um, engage people, like people real. It comes back to the will conversation.
Mhm.
Yes.
Somebody
Mhm.
has to have the will to do
Mhm.
the work, and
Right.
it's very easy for people in positions of power and privilege to not have the will.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
and and I don't mean it.
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't, and it just is what it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I struggle with it every day because I'm like, oh, I want to shake the stupid out of someone.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I kind of have to, just keep doing what I'm doing. And so,
Mhm.
to your question, Cheryl, some of it is, get your butt into an affinity group, and we have one tonight. So if you're listening right now, you can go to the Project Sanctus website and register, and then come join us and see what it is. The other
Mhm.
is there. I mean, there are multiple things. It's just some of my hesitation is, when I say things about what you can do, what people do is they go off and do it on their own.
Mhm.
I need you to do it collectively.
There has to be a collective consciousness. Now we're down to our last 2 minutes, minute and a half almost. And Kelly, final thought. What is one thing you want to leave the group with today as we move forward?
The one thing I want to leave with the group, because I get accused of, you're so negative. I want to go back to celebrating. I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. Is that so the one thing I want to leave is that there is hope. Like, we're
Yes.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm the hope,
Mhm.
but I need to get out of my head, and I need to stop all this positivity thinking, and that,
Yeah.
you got to see it right, not set it right. No, you have to set it right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And get out of the privilege of all the, this perfect pattern of what I don't know, and just, the boots on the ground. But we are it. We're
Mhm.
it, and I don't mean that in a
Mhm.
principled cognitive kind of way. I mean, for
Mhm.
For real,
Mhm.
we're it.
real.
Well, thank you so much for
And
being
one other final thought on that is that
here.
also, we are the hope. You can do this. You have the will. And the second part of that is, are you willing to do those things knowing you may never see the fruits of your labor?
Absolutely.
That's the
But
hard.
generations later will.
Yes.
Yeah. Good
Thank
points.
you so much.
Mhm.
Please stick around for a minute. I have a question for you after the show. Thank you so much for being here. Cheryl, quick thought?
For me, I just want to quote Maya Angelou. She says, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." So I would like to encourage people to live that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you have
Thank
to
you so
want to
much.
do better.
Gotta want to do better.
Yeah.
Well, do better, everybody. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out Kelly's website. Go to Project Sanctus and make sure you're in that affinity group tonight. Bless you all, and I'll see you all next week.
Bye.